Here's the TLDR for this video. If you want the absolute best performance f2.8 zoom lenses for Sony mirrorless cameras and money is not so much an hindrance, then just get the Sony G Master lenses. However, if you're on a budget and need to get a f2.8 zoom lens that performs decently enough for most video needs, then you should consider these Sigma lenses and the MC-11 adapter. If you're a creative professional like me, I know that you're busy, so there are timestamps down below in case you want to jump around to the relevant sections. Also, this video is not sponsored. These are my own thoughts and opinions, having personally bought and used these lenses for some time now. Okay, let's jump into this video. So, you're a Sony videographer on a budget, and you've been drooling over those new Sony 70-200 f2.8 G Master lenses or the Sony 24-70 f2.8 G Master lens, but you don't have the moolah to splurge on them. So you need a fast f2.8 zoom lens, especially if you're going to be using them professionally to get the quality and the blurry background and cinematic look that you want. But then you stumble over Sigma's line of art and sport lenses and wonder, could these be the budget lenses for me? The only problem is they come in Canon EF mounts, not Sony E-mounts. But what if I bought the Sigma MC-11 lens adapter? Even with the lens adapter, I'd still be paying about half the price of the Sony equivalent. However, now you've got a whole bunch of other questions lingering on your mind. Will it be compatible with the Sony camera body that I have? Will the autofocus work with the adapter in video? If it does, will it be too slow to work for me? How about the image quality? Well, if you're searching for those answers, like I was, you found the right video with answers from someone who's actually tried it out themselves. And I know the feeling of being a little trigger shy to buy expensive gear with a hard-earned money. I was searching for a video to answer these exact same questions about these lenses, which is why I actually decided to make this video, hoping that maybe someone else will benefit. Let's start with some spec comparisons. The two lenses which I currently use the Sigma MC-11 adapter on my Sony camera bodies are the Sigma 70-200 f2.8 DG-OS HSM sports lens, that's a mouthful, and the Sigma 24-70 f2.8 DG-OS HSM art lens for the Canon EF mount. For the 24-70 lens, I'm using the Canon EF mount rather than the Sony E-mount version because the Canon version actually has the optical steady shot, something which I wanted for video work, and unfortunately Sigma didn't put the OSS in the Sony mount version for some odd reason. Why Sigma? Why? Now I've had this lens for over 5 years now and it's been put to good use, as you can see from these scratches. Compared to the version 2 of the Sony 24-70 f2.8, which retails for about $2,300 US, this Sigma 24-70 only retails for $1,300 US. And while it's smaller and lighter than the Sigma, the Sony also doesn't have optical stabilization, which this one does. So that's a win for me, at least for the Sigma lens. The Sigma lens also has a much closer focusing distance, which is 1.21 inches compared to Sony's 8.3 inches. So you can get some really sweet macro shots with the Sigma lens that you just can't get with the Sony lens. Now, both lenses extend as you zoom, and the Sigma is slightly shorter at full extension than the Sony at 5.45 inches versus the 6 inches of the Sony. This is not a huge difference, but it does impact balance on a gimbal, although the lighter weight of the Sony does make it easier for the gimbal motors. But if you've got a good gimbal with good motors, I still use the original Ronin S for example, you should be fine. The bokeh on the Sigma is quite different from the Sony, with only 9 rounded diaphragm blades, with only 9 rounded diaphragm blades compared to Sony's 11. The Sigma also has a bit of barrel distortion and vignetting at the 24mm range, but I don't think it's ugly by any means, and the color reproduction and sharpness on the Sigma lens is actually really great, as is to be expected from their art line of lenses. I definitely don't feel like I suffer from any noticeable lack of image quality using the Sigma lens, and my clients definitely have never had any issues with the footage from it. Now, what about the 70-200mm lenses? The version 2 of the Sony 70-200 f2.8 lens, the G Master version, retails for around $2,800 US, while the Sigma version of the 70-200 f2.8 is only $1,500 US and comes in black instead of white, which to me was actually an advantage. I know, the white lens is like the signature of the pro lenses, right? But when you think about it, if you're at an event where you need to be discreet or at a wedding, I actually prefer black lenses, a little more inconspicuous. because this 70-200 is already a big honking eye-catching lens and there's no need to draw additional attention. Now, the Sigma lens is heavier than the Sony lens, weighing at 3.97 pounds versus Sony at the 2.3 pound weight. Plus, when you add in that converter, it's going to add even more weight. Now, if you're shooting on a tripod, that's not an issue, but this might be a factor for you to consider in terms of arm fatigue if you're shooting handheld with this for a long period of time. Or you could just suck it up and get them gains, bro. Alright, so this is what the 70-200 looks like with the MC-11 adapter on it. You can see it does protrude quite a bit off of the camera. Now, overall, Sigma builds their lenses like tanks, and they feel like they could weather an atomic blast. You gotta love that build quality. For me, the extra weight is actually not an issue, since most of the time I'm using the 70-200 on a tripod anyways for a long shot. Another difference to consider on this one is that the minimal focusing distance for the Sigma is significantly longer than the Sony at almost 4 feet before you can focus, versus Sony's ability to focus close up to 16 inches. So if you need to focus your 70-200 lens close up, that's another thing to consider. Although most use cases that I can think of on such a long lens, I doubt that you're going to need to focus on objects closer than 4 feet. Generally speaking, I'm using this lens more so for its far reach, not really for macro style photography or videography, but that's just me. Now, the Sigma 70-200 lens that I have here has 11 rounded diaphragm blades, like the Sony, and actually produces really nice bokeh rings. The sharpness and color reproduction on this lens is also really pleasant to me. Now, the focus motors on both Sigma lenses are a bit louder than the Sony lenses, and that's just something that you're going to have to deal with. If you're primarily recording your audio off camera, like me, maybe using one of these lav mics or some sort of external mic, then that shouldn't really be an issue. There's also a bit more focus breathing with these Sigma lenses than the Sonys, but again, that's not really a huge issue for me. And at this point, it's not worth the extra $1,300 US, especially since I can buy a whole other lens with that money. Now, one nice feature with both Sigma lenses is that they both use 82mm filter threads, which means that I can use the same variable ND filter on either lens without having to use stepping rings. Okay, so that's all great and everything, but how do they focus with video with that adapter? Because it's no use having great glass if your footage is all out of focus, right? And I'll just give an upfront disclaimer on this section. I don't own every single Sony camera, so I can't personally vouch for every single one of them and the exact compatibility with these lenses and this adapter. However, if you have the equivalent Sony cameras or cameras that are more up to date than mine, chances are that you're going to have similar results, since Sony's firmware tends to keep previous features and compatibilities from that camera line. Now, the 3 Sony cameras that I do own and have tested these lenses with the adapter for video work are the Sony A7 III and the Sony ZV-E1 and the Sony FX3, which I'm shooting on right now. Now, here are my results. Okay, so this is the 24-70 f2.8 Sigma on the FX3. And just so you can see just how close you can get with the Sigma lens, this is about where it starts to lose focus. So right here. So at this distance, my eye is still in focus, and this distance, it's not. That's probably way too up close and personal for YouTube, right? All right, so this is the 70-200 f2.8 Sigma. Now, you will notice that the framing is a little bit different in this. For some reason, 70mm on the 24-70 doesn't look the same as 70mm on the 70-200. Okay, so this is the minimum focusing distance for the 70-200, and you can see right about there I start to lose eye autofocus. So right here, my eyes are in focus, and then move forward a little bit, that's out of focus. So that's just about a little bit more than an arm's length away, right? So you can't focus super close with the 70-200. But I do think that the autofocus performance is really good for video and should suit your needs. Okay, so this is the performance on the ZVE1 with the 24 to 70mm Sigma lens. You can see that it's pretty quick on catching my eye with the eye autofocus system. Right, it's following it and keeping it really nicely. Even up to close distance, you can see that. The new autofocus system is working really nicely with the ZVE1, even adapted with the MC-11 adapter. Autofocus looks great. Nice and sticky. You can tell the difference between the autofocusing system on the newer ZVE1 and the older, A7 III, and even the FX3 doesn't have quite as robust of a new focusing system. So definitely with the new Sony cameras and their new autofocus, the improved autofocus, you'll get a lot better performance. Alrighty, and this is the 70 to 200mm on the ZVE1. You can see that it catches my eye very quickly. The eye autofocus is tracking and sticking to my eye, which is great. Of course, once I get in beyond the minimal focusing distance, it goes out of focus, but once I'm back in the focusing range for this lens, it's quick to catch focus again. So this is the 24 to 70 2.8 on the A7 III. Seems like the A7 III does adjust the focus a little bit slower and is not as good with the autofocus. That makes sense because it's an older autofocusing system. So I don't think that's a problem of the adapter and lens necessarily, but more so the camera body. If you have a more updated camera body, the autofocus should be a lot snappier. All right, so this is the 70 to 200 2.8 on the A7 III. Now you will notice that the image is slightly different just because the A7 III doesn't record really nicely in S-Log3 without 10-bit. It's an 8-bit camera. So I'm using this in HLG instead. But I think you can see that the autofocus here works as well, right? So I'd say that overall, even though the more expensive Sony lenses do have some advantages over the Sigma lenses, for me, they aren't worth twice the price at this point. Perhaps sometime in the future, I may be able to justify that kind of an upgrade, but for now, these Sigmas actually serve my purposes really well and I'm very happy with them. I think that if you're just getting started, working on smaller video projects, or you just have a tighter budget, then these Sigma lenses with the MC-11 adapter are actually going to work just fine. Especially if you're going to be using them to manually pull focus anyways. But even with autofocus, the performance is decent and it gets the job done, although slightly slower and less smooth than what you would expect to get from the more expensive Sony lenses. If you're doing more expensive video production and you have the budget, then it's a no-brainer. Just get the Sony lens. The extra performance difference will probably be worth it to you in the long run, and the autofocus will be a bit more snappy. No sense skimping on saving a little cost when you could potentially make back that in just 1 or 2 jobs. Here is a comparison summary chart of the Sigma and Sony lenses with their pros and cons. Feel free to pause the video here and check it out fully. Hopefully this will be helpful to you as a summary of this video's findings. It seems to me like, at least with the Sigma lenses and the MC-11 adapter, it does a really good job at retaining functionality, which makes sense since it's all the same manufacturer, right? Sigma to Sigma. I can't guarantee the same experience if you were to use, let's say, the Sigma MC-11 adapter with Canon lenses or some other brand of lens. I have tried this adapter out with a few Canon lenses and the performance kind of varied quite a bit. If you have any of the Sony camera bodies that I've tested here, or newer ones or parallel models, and what I mean by that is, for example, the Sony A7 III is pretty much the same as the Sony A7C, which is basically this in a smaller body, then you should have similar performance that I have in this video. I've personally used these lenses on the A7C body actually with no issue, and similarly for the crop sensor Sony A6600. So at least for those other two Sony models, I can safely say from personal experience that your results are going to be pretty similar to what we got in this video. So what do you think? Are you going to pick up these Sigma lenses with the MC-11 adapter for your Sony camera? Let me know down in the comments. Or if you've been using them, let me know your experience and what it's been. At the end of the day, get the lens that fits your budget to get the work that pays you. There will always be new gear coming out and more shiny things to get you distracted, right? My name is Thaddeus from Curious Creative, and I hope you found this video helpful. Please like and subscribe if you got value from this video, and until next time, go create something awesome.